always ignore this huge factor of climate change. And I was very glad that my friend Nagaraj showed you on video the kind of destruction that is going on in the Amazon and in the climate of South America because of the destruction of the Amazon forests. As a result, last year I said, you cannot be bearish on ag prices. I said BMD will trade between 3,700 and 4,500 ringgits between November 23 and June 24. I also said that CBOT futures will remain strong until June and then weaken, but the basis will become stronger. I think this time my forecast came absolutely accurate. At POC in Kuala Lumpur in March, I again reiterated the theme of capricious climate. And I said that BMD will go higher once again to almost 4,500 ringgits, then retrace back to 3,800 by the GAPki conference. There I was wrong. It went back to 3,800 much before the GAPki Congress, and now of course it is soaring ahead just as we are here. BMD peaked in April at 4,420 and then retraced all the way back below 4,000 and is now climbing to new highs once again. First, let us examine the reasons why the market went lower. There was good rainfall in the palm oil belt and the effect of the El Nino was not yet felt. There were decent monsoon rains in India. Europe had decent weather, not as bad as the previous 2 years, but not very good either, but okay. South America had good weather, huge soybean crop, followed by another big bumper soya crop in North America. So we have had almost uninterrupted range of good weather. Now remember what I am saying about capricious climate. Don't push your luck. Weather will not remain good indefinitely. And these days, the intervals by which the weather breaks down are becoming more and more frequent. And we have to be careful of them. Now last year, or in the last 12 months, weather has been relatively good. So oilseed farmers would have suffered lower prices, but biofuels came to the rescue. And there has been lopsided growth in our industry. Higher production of oilseeds because of technology, GM, better fertilizer use, better farm management, but stagnation in the agricultural practices of the palm oil industry. And there we are all to blame. Malaysia, Indonesia, India, Thailand, everyone is to blame. We are not replanting, we are not improving our planting material. Whatever planting material companies have produced, they are unable to roll out. They are unable to spread and take advantage of the high yields. In oilseeds, we are now this year facing a situation of overproduction of meal. And in my country, in India in particular, the government has allowed sugar to be turned into ethanol for blending into gasoline. This is what Brazil has been doing for decades. India has just started doing, which has brought us a new problem of what is called corn DDG. That is an excellent animal feed material. So, our market for soybean meal in India and the crushing of soybeans in India has got handicapped to that extent. Now, let us examine, I'm taking you through recent history because remember, you cannot ignore history, but you can draw lessons from it. Recent months, palm has been uncompetitive and too expensive. Sunflower was cheap and very competitive. Soya oil outlook production-wise improved dramatically with big crops. And then the trouble started. First with sunflower oil having a problem in Ukraine and Russia because of drought. Production was down. Now rapeseed oil also had similar problems in Europe, partly in Canada, and as a result, we have shortfall in the production of sunflower seed and rapeseed compared to last year. These were the two oils which were putting pressure on palm, on all oils. This year, these oils are not going to put pressure. They are acting as a rocket. And lauric oils have become bullish, partly because the production curve for sunflower, for coconut oil has started to move down. And there is a genetic problem in the new seeds which are being used for replanting, mainly in Malaysia and also now in Indonesia. If you talk to planters, they will tell you that the new seeds give you much more mesocarp or flesh for palm, but the kernel is very small, and the smaller kernel leads to less recovery of palm kernel oil. This is something which is happening only on 5% of the acreage or 10% of the acreage as of now. But eventually it will spread to 100% of the acreage when all the replanting is done. So consumers of lauric oils, be on your guard. This is an early warning system which you only get at a gapki convention. Now, what is the elephant in the room? Well, it's no longer an elephant in the room because all the speakers have been talking about it and you have come here to find the answer. The palm oil industry, in my opinion, has been gobsmacked by the recent strong rally which started on the 13th of September 2024. Why do I remember the date? Because that is the date the Indian government announced a 20% import duty, extra import duty of 20%. And everybody thought, including the Indian government, myself, Dr. Mehta, everyone thought that with the duty coming, prices will come down. Traditionally, when India imposes the import duty, it raises the domestic price, consumption falls, so part of the duty is absorbed at origin and only part of it is passed on to the Indian consumer. That has been the logic for the last 20 years. But this time, origin did not shake. Origin did not move. The entire 20% import duty burden was thrust on the Indian consumer and the Indian consumer absorbed it. That was, I believe, a watershed moment, and that should have told us at that time that something is happening in the palm market that we are missing. Unfortunately, many of us did not notice it or noticed it too late. But the funds who trade Dalian and BMD were much cleverer than what we thought. Either they had some divine inspiration, or they were reading charts, or they arrived at the right conclusions. But these funds went in with massive support, and they are today driving Dalian and BMD. And wait until the January contract settles, and you will see the open interest is at an all-time high. And all of it is in the hands not of palm oil players. The palm oil players got eliminated very quickly. All the plantations who had been hedging, selling at 3,500, selling at 4,000, when they started getting the margin calls in October, they all bought back their hedges. That gave a further fuel to the fire. But the funds are still there. And there are some unfortunate shorts who are also trapped. And the exit window is getting smaller and smaller every day. We have to see how the January contract finishes. We will come to know by middle of December. But until then, we have a situation which is now highly technical in nature, where the market is in the hands of the funds. And for once, this happens, coincidence happens about once every 10 years, that the funds take the lead and the physical fundamentals of supply and demand also move in that direction. The two are not as a result of each other. It's purely coincidental. But the movement takes place in the same direction. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what we are seeing today. History is being made in front of your eyes. And I do not for 1 minute dispute the long-term projection which my friend Nagaraj put forward, that the BMD in 2025 can go to 7,000. I will not stop at 7,000. I would say it can go to ATH, all-time high. We have to be mentally prepared for higher prices, and we have to realize that this climate change and the NGOs who have put restrictions on the expansion of production have been responsible for forcing the consumer to pay high and higher prices. So, if you look at the fundamentals, the reasons for the current rally, production has been below expectation in Indonesia and Thailand between Jan and August. Very few people were aware that Thailand was having a problem until last week Thailand announced a ban on export of CPO. It is really something very serious, because whenever Malaysia, Indonesia are not able to export CPO, who comes to the rescue of India? Thailand. But this year, Thailand is the first to run away, saying we can't export. Be careful. Malaysian exports have been strong. Once again, as was pointed out earlier, the Indonesian problems and Indonesian market domestically has been so strong that it has been diverting export demand to Malaysia. With the result that Malaysian stocks probably have peaked already and will not rise any further. So we will go into the lean season of stocks. Normally we build stocks up to November, December, and then we deplete stocks from January onwards. But this year, wait until the MPOB report which comes out next week. You may find that we have peaked stocks in October and we start drawing them down. This, I believe, is something that the market, the experts, the pundits did not expect. The futures funds probably expected it. So this is again a convergence of the very bullish fund activity now being supported by physical. When I say the buy side has been very strong, I meant the funds, because the funds have been absolutely unshakable. Now there is one marker, a signal, which we should have caught, but we failed. And I very humbly put myself in that category, that I also missed that marker. The current rally has blindsided most people, if they are honest. Liars will say, oh, I knew prices were going to go up. But honest people will admit that they failed to see the rally coming. And the one important marker which we all failed to notice was the sharp decline in Indonesian CPO and RBDO palm oil exports to Malaysia. That is the swing factor. Indonesia ships 100,000, 150,000 tons of CPO and RBDPO to Malaysia. This is the product which they are not able to export to third countries, and because of their cost advantage, they are able to ship to Malaysia. But that has dried up completely. Look at the MBOB figures. Those shipments have come to 5,000, 3,000. We should have caught that. We failed to catch. It is possible that now, because in Indonesia the production is improving. The plantations that I met here in this conference from Kalimantan are reporting that production is coming. At the same time, because of its levy and duty structure, Indonesia is not so competitive. So there will be some stock built within Indonesia. And the first sign of CPO and RBDPO being shipped from Indonesia to Malaysia, for whatever reason, either stock build, or they want to avoid the higher duty of the next month, the higher levy of the next month, for whatever reason, once that flow starts again, watch the MPOB report very carefully on the 10th and watch the next report even more carefully. Once that flow starts, that will show that Indonesia is okay, good stocks, market will come down. This is a marker which we all missed, and I would invite you to keep this marker alive and follow it in the future. As I put the question, will this marker work again? Yes, I think it should work, but we have to be alert and watch. Now, some comments on the world economy. China is stimulating and growing again. I am a great optimist about China. And I think people are unduly pessimistic about China. China continues to grow at slower rates, but I think the rate will accelerate. The USA and Europe, before the Trump result, I was expecting both countries will slide into a mild recession after a period of very good growth and prosperity. Interest rates need to go lower. Equity markets need to shed some of the froth. Now, I wrote this paper before Mr. Trump got elected, and we had that gigantic rally on the night of the election result. Clearly, the new president of the United States will affect everything. But remember, Trump will be Trump. And that means he will be Mr. Unpredictable. Do not expect him to do exactly what he did during his first term. And expect him to do the unthinkable, the unforeseeable, and that is why markets will be extremely interesting. The viewership of TV channels, the sales of newspapers, the sales of magazines will all shoot up because everybody will be writing about Mr. Trump and commenting about him. And all of us will want to read it, to enjoy it, to make fun of it, and to discuss it. So life is going to be very interesting for the next few years, I can assure you. In that context, let us look at Palm 24-25. At POC this year, I correctly forecast the shape of things to come. We have to be careful. The age profile of the trees is getting worse. There is no expansion in hectarage. FFP yields are declining. And these factors were taken into account by the funds who went into the Dalian and the BMD. We physical players seem to have slept through it. But there is no reason to regret. There is every reason to be alert and to realize that we have a supply problem. And what we are doing, particularly in Indonesia, is we are adding to demand without adding to supply. And that cannot be a good solution. Your president is a very fine man. Hats off, he got elected, he's saying all the right things. But I am afraid he needs to be well advised by the industry, by his colleagues and others. Because B50, B60 sounds good, but it is not practical in today's world with today's production. And I know it is very easy for me as a foreigner to tell you this. In my own country, I can't say it. Similarly, in your country, you have to be very diplomatic, you have to be very careful. But try in whatever way you can. And I know gapki and the industry, normally when they want to do something, they get it done. The biodiesel program, I am, along with Dr. James Fry, we are the authors of the original biodiesel suggestion, which was put at the request of gapki. And your government eventually accepted it. The good thing about Indonesia unlike some other countries, is that the government listens. And I will give you a practical example because this date is so strong in my mind. You know, you had the ban on export of palm oil in 2022 for good reasons, but it created havoc in the market. Indonesian plantations, Indonesian smallholders were all suffering, and some of these people are my best friends. And eventually, two of them came to me and said, Dorab, why don't you write an open letter to President Jokowi? And I did. And thanks to Reuters, the famous news agency, I have to say thank you to them. They ensured that my letter reached 5 ministers in Indonesia. One of them, I will not mention him by name, took it to President Jokowi. The letter was published on 1st of June 2022. Check your records. On the 8th of June, the President signed the order revoking the export ban. That is Indonesia. And that is why I am such a great admirer of your country. And you should keep lobbying with the President, with the new President, to ensure that you need to do something about this B40. Either you bring it in after Ramzan, give it time, or you restructure the levy and export duty system, or you give it more time. But do not rush into it in such a way that Indonesia is handicapped. Because for every 1 ton of biodiesel that you subsidize and produce and do not use fossil diesel, you are wasting $300 a ton. That you may feel, oh, it's a long-term cost, we can absorb it. But why? There is a practical way of doing it, and you have to spend your effort, your time, your energy to educate the new government, the new officials, the new economists on the practicality, the practical difficulty of this. And once you succeed with that, also try and convince your government to lift the moratorium and allow sustainable expansion of palm oil cultivation. In a sustainable way. You have got ISPO. You have got various other regulations. So, but in a sustainable way, add to the production. Don't just remain diffident that production cannot expand. So, Malaysian production is turning out to be better than expected now, recently. Indonesia was expected to be lower than 23, but is improving. And in my opinion, the 2024 production in Indonesia will be unchanged from 23. Watch the figures. I may be wrong. I happen to be in a minority here. But what I am hearing about the production coming through in Kalimantan gives me confidence that Indonesian production is coming back. And clearly, the growing conditions in 2025 will be much better